Commander Zextal's antennae twitched as she watched the holographic display, her 4 eyes fixed on the moment of destruction. The defense platform, Outpost Sigma-12, one of the Qux-Thuri Dominion's most formidable installations, exploded in a brilliant cascade of crystalline shards. As debris scattered across the void, something caught her attention. A small object, barely visible among the wreckage, spinning slowly in the vacuum. "Magnify Sector 4 Beta," she ordered, her mandibles clicking with anticipation. A hologram zoomed in, revealing what appeared to be a delicate paper construction. An origami crane, perfectly preserved in the airless environment. Just like the others. "Another one," she muttered, mandibles tightening. This marked the 7th defense platform destroyed in as many cycles, each attack leaving behind the same signature. A single paper crane, mocking the Dominion's supposedly impenetrable defenses. The door to her observation chamber hissed open, admitting High Commander Vexthor, his carapace gleaming with the ceremonial markings of the Inner Council. "Commander Zextal, the Council requires you report on these incidents." Zextal's inner eyelids flickered, a gesture of frustration she couldn't quite suppress. "High Commander, these are not mere incidents. The attacks follow a pattern. Each platform was disabled with surgical precision, their shield generators targeted first, followed by—" "Spare me the tactical analysis," Vexthor interrupted, his antennae rigid with disapproval. "The Council has already determined these to be the works of resistance terrorists. Primitive beings using stolen technology they barely understand. With respect, High Commander, no resistance group has ever demonstrated this level of sophistication. The timing between attacks suggests a single vessel, moving faster than our best tracking systems can." "Impossible." Vexthor's carapace flushed deep purple with anger. "No single ship could breach our defense network. The very suggestion insults the 1,000-year legacy of the Dominion's technological supremacy." Zextal moved to another display, bringing up a temporal map of the attacks. "Then explain this pattern. Each strike occurs exactly 4.3 cycles apart. The targeting is consistent, the methodology identical. And these objects left behind." She highlighted the crane. "They're not random debris. They're messages." "Messages?" Vexthor scoffed. "From whom?" Before Zextal could respond, every display in the chamber flickered. A new alert flashed across the screens. Outpost Sigma-13 had gone dark. "No," Vexthor chittered. "Not another one. Not now." They watched in stunned silence as the outpost's death played out in real time. The shield generators failed first, their energy signatures winking out one by one. Then came the precision strikes, small, concentrated impacts that shouldn't have been able to penetrate the station's armor, yet somehow drilled through critical systems with devastating effect. As the station broke apart, Zextal's enhancement software automatically tracked and magnified a small object ejected from the wreckage. Another crane, spinning peacefully among the destruction. 4.3 cycles exactly, Zextal noted quietly. "And look, the crane was placed before the explosion. This isn't random, High Commander. This is choreographed. Someone is sending us a message, and they're doing it with style." Vexthor's mandibles worked silently for a moment. "The council meeting begins in 1 cycle. You will present your findings, but—" his antennae twitched nervously. "Perhaps omit your theories about messages and single ships. The council must maintain order. Understanding comes second to stability." After he left, Zextal returned to her temporal map. 8 stations now, each attacked with the same precision, each marked with the same signature. The pattern was clear, even if her superiors refused to see it. She reached into her desk, withdrawing one of the cranes recovered from an earlier attack. In the privacy of her chamber, she allowed herself to admire its construction. The precise folds, the delicate wings, the simple beauty of its design. Whoever their mysterious attacker was, they weren't just destroying stations. They were making art of warfare. And somehow, that terrified her more than any display of brute force ever could. Captain Jack Morrison stood at the viewport of the Constantinople, boots propped up on the console in blatant violation of protocol, watching the alien armada gather. His weathered face broke into a grin as he adjusted his worn leather cowboy hat, the same one he'd worn during his last rodeo championship back on Earth. "How many we got now, Martinez?" he called out to his sensor operator. Lieutenant Rosa Martinez, whose console was decorated with a collection of paper cranes, checked her readings. 200 and counting, Cap. They're arranging themselves in some kind of ceremonial battle formation. Very pretty. Want me to play them a song? Might as well. Let's give 'em the usual welcome. Morrison chuckled as the opening notes of Ghost Riders in the Sky began broadcasting across all frequencies. The Constantinople's misfit crew had turned psychological warfare into an art form over the past few weeks. "Sir," Lieutenant Commander Wei spoke up from Tactical. "They're charging weapons. All of them. Energy readings are off the charts." Morrison nodded, completely unfazed. "Well, ain't that cute? They still haven't figured it out." He straightened in his chair, finally taking his boots off the console. "Battle stations, folks. Let's show them how we do things back home." The Constantinople's crew moved with practiced efficiency, even as the massive alien fleet surrounding them began to glow with charged weapons. They were the reject crew, the ones no other captain wanted. The engineer who refused to follow standard protocols, the navigator who preferred intuition over computers, the security chief who'd been discharged from 3 posts for excessive creativity in crisis situations. "Incoming transmission," Martinez announced. "Text only. They're demanding our immediate surrender," and she squinted at her screen. "The secret of our paper sorcery." A laugh rippled through the bridge. Over the weeks, they'd discovered their habit of leaving origami cranes had spawned wild theories among the aliens. Some believed the paper constructs were sophisticated bombs. Others thought they were magical talismans. None had guessed they were simply art projects from Martinez's hobby club. "Send them our response," Morrison ordered. "Same as always." Martinez grinned and transmitted their standard reply, a digital image of a cowboy hat. The alien fleet opened fire. Streams of energy weapons, powerful enough to shatter planets, converged on the Constantinople. The bridge crew continued their work, unconcerned, as the barrage splashed harmlessly against their hull. "You'd think they'd learn," Wei commented, monitoring the attack. "Their weapons just don't work around us. Something about our experimental drive creates a localized field that." Now, Morrison interrupted with a wink. "Let's not spoil the mystery. Load the ball bearings, if you please. Standard spread." Wei's fingers danced across his console. The Constantinople's makeshift weapon systems, literally magnetic accelerators firing industrial ball bearings, hummed to life. They discovered that while the alien energy weapons were useless against them, good old-fashioned kinetic impacts worked just fine. "Target their flagship's sensor array," Morrison ordered. "And someone please turn up the music. If we're going to dance, might as well do it proper." The Constantinople's response was precisely calculated. A spread of accelerated ball bearings, each barely the size of a marble, punched through the alien flagship's supposedly impenetrable shields. The impacts weren't devastating, but they were embarrassing, leaving perfectly circular holes in the prestigious vessel's hull. "Martinez, get me an origami crane," Morrison called out as the alien fleet reeled in confusion. "I think their admiral needs a present." As the crew prepared for another round, Morrison reflected on the absurdity of their situation. Here they were, lost in space due to a drive malfunction, accidentally becoming the biggest threat to an alien empire's supremacy through a combination of technical glitches, improvised weapons, and what his crew had started calling tactical trolling. "Sir," Wei reported with a grin, "they're falling back. Again." "Well then," Morrison adjusted his hat. "Guess we better leave them our calling card. Martinez, make it a fancy one this time. And somebody cue up Save a horse, ride a cowboy for their retreat. Might as well give 'em something to think about. Commander Zextal's laboratory hummed with activity as she studied footage of the Constantinople's latest encounter. Her antennae twitched in fascination as she watched another ball-bearing puncture a Dominion shield rated to withstand supernova. Play it again, she ordered her assistant Carl. Slow to 1/10 speed. The holographic display rewound, showing the primitive projectile's trajectory. There was no energy signature, no exotic particle emissions, just simple kinetic force, and that was precisely why it worked. We've become too reliant on energy-based technology, Zextal muttered, mandibles clicking in revelation. Our shields, our weapons, our entire defensive doctrine, all based on manipulating and blocking energy. But surely, Commander, Carl interjected, our technology is superior. These humans, they're using projectiles like savages. Zextal turned all four eyes on her assistant. Tell me, Carl, what stops a thrown rock? Energy shields or physical armor? Before Carl could answer, their conversation was interrupted by an alert. The Constantinople had been spotted again, this time near a civilian shipping lane. But instead of attacking, they were protecting a merchant vessel from pirates. The footage showed the human ship positioning itself between a Cuxatheri merchant ship and a notorious pirate fleet. The pirates, using stolen Dominion weapons, opened fire, their energy beams dissipating harmlessly against the Constantinople's hull. The humans responded with their signature ball bearings, precisely targeted to disable the pirates' engines. Fascinating, Zextal observed. They're not conquerors at all. They're defending our people, even while fighting our military. She pulled up her classified research files. Over the past cycles, she documented every encounter with the human vessel. Their tactics were brilliant in their simplicity, using the physics of motion that the Dominion had abandoned millennia ago in favor of energy manipulation. Commander, Carl suddenly called out. The High Council is deploying the 7th Fleet. They're equipping them with physical projectile weapons. Zextal's inner eyelids flickered in alarm. What type? Missiles. Heavy ordnance. They're stripping our museum pieces for ancient ballistic weapons. No, Zextal chittered in frustration. They still don't understand. It's not just about physical weapons. The human's advantage. She pulled up an energy reading from the Constantinople. Look at this field their drive generates. It doesn't just block energy weapons, it destabilizes any complex energy matrix it encounters. She quickly composed a message to the High Council, warning them. Their retrofitted weapons wouldn't work. They still relied on energy-based guidance systems, energy-based detonators, energy-based everything. The response came swiftly. Her concerns were noted and dismissed. The 7th Fleet would proceed as planned. They're going to get that entire fleet destroyed, she muttered. Commander, Carl's antennae drooped in confusion. Surely you don't mean. Watch, Zextal commanded, pulling up a live feed of the 7th Fleet's approach to the Constantinople's position. The massive fleet launched their salvos of physical missiles, weapons that hadn't been used in combat for generations. For a moment, it seemed the Council's plan might work. Then the missiles entered the Constantinople's drive field. Their guidance systems failed first. Then their detonators misfired. The supposedly mighty barrage transformed into an expensive display of space debris, tumbling harmlessly past the human vessel. The Constantinople's response came in their now familiar style, a broadcast of something called Cotton Eye Joe across all frequencies, followed by another precision strike of magnetically accelerated ball bearings. Do you understand now? Zextal asked her assistant. Our fatal flaw isn't our reliance on energy weapons, it's our inability to adapt. We've forgotten simpler solutions in our pursuit of the complex. She watched as the 7th Fleet retreated in disarray, their humiliation complete. And there, drifting in their wake, was another paper crane, this one attached to what appeared to be a handwritten note. Zextal magnified the image, reading the message. Nice try with the missiles. For your next attempt, might we suggest slingshots? At least those don't need batteries. Captain Morrison. Her mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. These humans weren't just warriors. They were teachers, offering lessons the Dominion desperately needed to learn. Your transmission is unorthodox, Commander Zextal, Captain Morrison said, adjusting his hat as he studied the alien's image on the Constantinople's main screen. Her method of contact, a paper crane folded from classified military documents, had impressed him. As unorthodox as leaving origami at battle sites, Captain. Her mandibles clicked in what Morrison was beginning to recognize as amusement. We need to talk. Privately. The High Council is planning something desperate. Martinez muted the bridge audio. Cap, are we sure about this? Could be a trap. Morrison leaned back in his chair, boots crossing at the ankle. Anyone clever enough to figure out how to contact us using our own calling card deserves at least a conversation. Besides, he grinned, something tells me the commander here has a sense of humor. Don't get that much in this sector. The meeting was arranged at a defunct mining outpost. The Constantinople sensors confirmed Zextal arrived alone in a small research vessel, though Morrison brought Y along, just in case. The alien commander was taller in person, her 4 eyes studying them with unmistakable curiosity. Your ship's drive. She began without preamble. It generates a field that destabilizes energy matrices. But that's not its intended purpose, is it? Ma'am. Morrison tipped his hat. That drive wasn't supposed to do anything except get us to Alpha Centauri. Instead, it dropped us here and started causing all sorts of interesting problems with your fancy energy weapons. You're trying to get home. Zextal's antennae twitched. All this time, you've been making the best of a bad situation, Morrison finished. Though I gotta admit, showing up your military's been mighty entertaining. Way cleared his throat. Captain, maybe we shouldn't be sharing. Son, Morrison interrupted. The commander here could have brought a fleet. Instead, she brought proof. He held up the crane she'd sent, made from military documents. Proof that her own people are about to do something stupid. Zextal's carapace darkened. What Morrison assumed was their version of grimacing. The High Council is preparing to deploy forbidden weapons. Planet killers. They would rather destroy entire worlds than admit their technological supremacy has a flaw. Well, that ain't very sporting of them, Morrison drawled. Got any suggestions? Your drive. Zextal moved to a console, bringing up technical diagrams. If we modified it, created a cascading effect. Her mandibles clicked rapidly. We could disable their energy weapons permanently, not just in a localized field, but across the entire sector. Wei studied the diagrams. That could work. But Captain, it would fry our drive. We'd be stranded here. For good. Morrison was quiet for a moment, absent-mindedly adjusting his hat. How many people in the sector, Commander? Trillions, Zextal answered, across thousands of worlds. And how many on my ship? 82, Wei replied softly. Morrison stood, walking to the viewport. Stars twinkled beyond. Different constellations than the ones he'd grown up under, roping cattle in Texas. Seems like simple math to me. Captain. Zextal's voice carried an emotion he couldn't quite identify. You would sacrifice your only way home to save people who've been trying to destroy you. Morrison turned, grinning. Ma'am, where I come from, that's just called being neighborly. He extended his hand. Besides, seems to me your people could use some lessons in old-fashioned problem-solving. Might as well stick around to teach them. Zextal stared at his hand before carefully extending her own. I don't understand this gesture. It's called a handshake, Morrison explained. Where I come from, it means we've got ourselves a deal. As they shook hands, human and alien joining in conspiracy against an empire, White couldn't help but laugh. You realize, Captain, if we pull this off, we'll be stuck here teaching aliens how to play cowboys and Indians. Morrison's grin widened. Son, I can think of worse retirement plans. Commander, how do your people feel about learning to ride horses? Once this is all over, I reckon it's time the Dominion had its first rodeo. Zextal's antennae twitched in confusion. What's a rodeo? Oh, Commander, Morrison chuckled. Have I got some stories for you? The Dominion's most prestigious military academy was in chaos. Commander Zextal watched from her hidden observation post as cadets practiced throwing metal spheres at targets, their ceremonial energy weapons discarded. Someone had replaced the Academy's traditional battle hymn with something called Sweet Home Alabama. Your Earth music is spreading faster than a plasma storm, she commented to Morrison through their secure channel. The younger generation particularly enjoys something called country rock. Morrison's chuckle crackled through the communicator. Just wait till they discover line dancing. How's the revolution going? See for yourself. Zextal transmitted footage from across the sector. Resistance cells had adopted human tactics with religious fervor. Merchant ships now carried railguns alongside their energy cannons. Paper cranes appeared everywhere, marking successful raids, decorating ships, even being sold as good luck charms in marketplaces. That's either flattering or terrifying, Morrison mused. Hard to tell which. A group of cadets marched past Zextal's position, wearing crude approximations of cowboy hats fashioned from salvaged armor plating. They were practicing what they believed to be human battle cries. Yeehaw! And, like a good neighbor. They're mixing up your combat shouts with advertising jingles again, Zextal noted. I tried explaining the difference, but they insist both are equally powerful Earth magic. The Constantinople, meanwhile, had become legend. Stories spread about the human vessel that danced through energy barrages, dispatched elite fleets with primitive weapons, and left paper blessings in its wake. Street artists painted murals of the ship, usually depicting it with an oversized cowboy hat. Captain, Lieutenant Martinez cut in on the channel. You need to see this. The resistance cells are coordinating attacks using line dance instructions. Morrison nearly choked on his coffee. Come again. They're encoding tactical data in dance steps, Martinez explained, barely containing her laughter. The Dominion's cryptography can't crack it because they can't tell the difference between actual dance moves and military coordinates. The latest attack pattern is disguised as something called the electric slide. Zextal's antennae twitched as she processed this. Fascinating. Our military analysts are currently trying to determine the strategic significance of boot-scooting boogie. The revolution was unlike anything the Dominion had faced. They couldn't fight an enemy that turned their greatest weapons into jokes, that treated warfare like a dance party, that inspired their own people to trade energy rifles for slingshots and railguns. Sir, Wei's voice joined the channel. The High Council just issued new regulations banning paper folding, human music, and any headwear resembling your hat. They're calling it the Cultural Preservation Act. How's that working out? Morrison asked, already knowing the answer. The black market for origami supplies just tripled. And Y paused, checking his data. There's now an underground network of cowboy hat speakeasies. Morrison leaned back in his captain's chair, shaking his head in amazement. They'd come to this sector by accident, fought the Dominion out of necessity, and somehow started a cultural revolution through sheer force of personality. Commander, he addressed Zextal, your people seem mighty eager to embrace change. 1,000 years of rigid control, she replied, watching another group of cadets practice with makeshift railguns. You showed them something different. Something. Her mandibles clicked thoughtfully, more alive. The observation was interrupted by new alerts. The High Council had ordered mass arrests of suspected human culture sympathizers. But for every person detained, 10 more seemed to join the resistance. Paper cranes rained from windows. Underground bands played twangy alien approximations of country music. The Constantinople's influence had become unstoppable. You know, Morrison drawled, this wasn't exactly what I meant when I said we should teach your folks about Earth culture. Perhaps not, Zextal agreed, watching a group of resistance fighters practice what they believed to be authentic Earth combat moves. A bizarre mixture of square dancing and martial arts. But it may be exactly what the Dominion needed. A paper crane drifted past her window, carrying a message in both human and Kextheri script. The revolution will be line danced. The High Council chamber fell silent as the weapon schematics rotated in the holographic display. Even the most hardened Kextheri counselors' antennae drooped at the sight of the planet-killer devices. "This is madness," Zextal whispered into her hidden communicator. From her position in the observation gallery, she could see the council's carapaces darkening with anticipation. They're preparing to sacrifice billions of their own people. "How long do we have?" Morrison's voice was uncharacteristically serious. "Hours, maybe less. The weapon platforms are all ready." She stopped as new information scrolled across her datapad. "No, they're activating them now." Aboard the Constantinople, Morrison stood, his usual laid-back demeanor replaced by fierce determination. "Martinez, get me every resistance cell on frequency." "Why, I need those calculations we discussed. It's time for the craziest rodeo this galaxy's ever seen." "Sir," Wei's fingers flew across his console, "you can't be serious about the gravity lasso. The power requirements alone mold." "Son," Morrison interrupted, "I once rode a bull named Widowmaker for 8.2 seconds with a dislocated shoulder. Sometimes crazy is all you've got." He turned to Martinez. "Get me Zextal on screen. And foo up something appropriate." The opening riffs of "The Devil Went Down to Georgia" filled the bridge as Zextal's image appeared. "The Council's powering up all 12 platforms simultaneously," she reported. "The energy readings air." "Exactly what we need," Morrison finished. "Commander, remember those old vids I showed you? The ones with the cowboys lassoing cattle?" Her antennae twitched in realization. "Captain, you cannot be suggesting. We're going to rope ourselves some doomsday weapons," he grinned, but his eyes were steel. "Wei, divert all power to the drive. Martinez, broadcast these coordinates to every resistance ship in range. Tell them to be ready for the biggest square dance in history." The Constantinople's experimental drive hummed to life, its energy-disrupting field expanding. But this time, instead of simply blocking energy weapons, they were about to try something unprecedented. "Initializing gravity manipulation," Wei announced. "Field coherence at 62% and climbing." "Sir, if this doesn't work." "It'll work," Morrison assured him, adjusting his hat. "Because the alternative is watching good people die, and that ain't happening on my watch." The weapon platforms began to glow, their planet-killing energy building to apocalyptic levels. In the council chamber, Zextal watched the counselors' mandibles click in anticipation of their ultimate display of power. "Now, Captain," she transmitted, "they're about to." Morrison's voice cut across all frequencies. "Yee-haw. Let's wrangle us some hardware, folks." The Constantinople's modified drive field shot out like a glowing lasso, wrapping around the nearest weapon platform. Physics itself seemed to protest as gravitational forces twisted in ways they were never meant to. "First platform secured," Wei reported. "Drive stability of 43% and falling. Resistance ships moving into position," Martinez added. They're actually line dancing their attack patterns." Morrison grabbed his console as the ship shuddered. "Tell them to keep dancing. The energy disruption patterns match the steps. It's actually helping." In space, the impossible unfolded. The Constantinople, glowing with otherworldly energy, swung the captured weapon platform like a cosmic cowboy's lariat. Resistance ships moved in precise, choreographed patterns, their improvised weapons picking off Dominion defenders. Second platform caught. Wei called out. Third one coming in range. In the council chamber, pandemonium erupted as their superweapons were literally lassoed away. Counselors screamed orders that no one followed, their authority crumbling as they watched their ultimate weapons being rustled like stray cattle. Captain, Zextel's voice carried both awe and concern. Your drive can't take this strain much longer. Morrison watched his ship's systems redline, the deck plating groaning beneath his feet. No, he agreed, it can't. But we ain't done yet. He opened a channel to all ships. Ladies, gentlemen, and various alien folks, let's show these politicians how we do things back home. Time for the grand final. The Constantinople groaned like a wounded bull, its experimental drive straining against physics itself as it wrangled the sixth planet-killer platform into their improvised coral of disrupted space. Drive stability at 12% and falling. We shouted over the shriek of protesting metal. We can't hold this pattern much longer. Morrison stood braced against his captain's chair, hat somehow still perfectly positioned despite the chaos. Martinez, how are our dance partners doing? Resistance fleets holding formation, she reported, her console a symphony of flashing alerts. They're broadcasting. Save a horse, ride a cowboy, on all frequencies. The Dominion ships don't know whether to shoot or start dancing. Through the view screen, the scene was beyond surreal. Dozens of captured planet-killer platforms floated in a rough circle, corralled by the Constantinople's gravity lasso. Resistance ships moved in precise patterns around them, their movements matching the rhythm of Earth country music, while their makeshift weapons kept the Dominion fleet at bay. Commander, Morrison called to Zextel, who was still transmitting from the council chamber, how are our friends in high places taking this? The video feed showed absolute chaos. Council members were either fleeing or frozen in horror, as their superweapons were literally being rounded up like wayward space cattle. There, Zextel's mandibles clicked rapidly. They're trying to trigger the platform's self-destruct sequences. Captain, if those devices detonate while linked by your gravity field. That's exactly what we're counting on, Morrison interrupted. Wei, you got that calculation figured out yet? Sir, Wei's fingers danced across his console. If we reverse the drive's polarity at the exact moment they detonate, the resulting cascade shoaled. A new alarm cut him off. The weapon platforms were beginning to pulse with deadly energy. 30 seconds to detonation, Martinez announced. Resistance fleet requesting instructions. Morrison straightened his hat, a gesture that had become a signal to his crew. They knew what it meant. Something crazy was coming. Tell our friends to clear out, he ordered. But first, Martinez, remember that line dance routine you were teaching in the mess hall last week. The Cotton-Eyed Joe. Sir, you can't be serious. Send the pattern to all ships. Tell them to follow our lead. Wei, sync the gravity pulses to the rhythm. As the weapon platforms counted down to detonation, the Constantinople began to move. Not the desperate maneuvers of a ship in battle, but the precise steps of a line dance, translated into 3 dimensions. Each movement adjusted the gravity field, weaving the captured platforms into an ever tighter pattern. 20 seconds. The resistance fleet, catching on, fell into formation. Dozens of ships, moving in perfect synchronization, their patterns creating interference waves in the Dominion's energy weapons. This is insanity, Zextel transmitted from the council chamber. It's beautiful. 10 seconds. Morrison took one last look at his crew. The rejects, the misfits, the ones no other captain wanted. They'd made this ship more than a home. They'd made it a legend. 5 seconds. Wei, reverse polarity on my mark. Martinez, one last song for the road. The opening notes of The Gambler echoed through space as the weapon platforms reached critical mass. Now, the Constantinople's drive field inverted just as the platforms detonated. Physics took a backseat to human ingenuity as the chain reaction followed the carefully choreographed pattern they'd created. Energy weapons across the sector began to fail as the cascade rippled outward. The ship's deck heaved one final time. Sparks flew from every console as the drive finally gave out. But by then, it had served its purpose. Report, Morrison called out, picking himself up. Drive's completely dead, Wei confirmed. "We're not going home, sir." Martinez's console lit up. "Sir, incoming transmissions from everywhere." The cascade worked. Energy weapons across the sector they're just ornaments now. Through the view screen, they watched the Dominion's mighty fleet drift powerless, their energy weapons nothing more than expensive decoration. The resistance ships, with their primitive but functional projectile weapons, now held the advantage. Morrison adjusted his hat one more time. "Well, folks, looks like we just changed the rules of the game. Send word to all ships. Time for the victory dance." 3 months after the Great Space Rodeo, as it had come to be known, Captain Jack Morrison stood before the newly formed Galactic Council, his worn cowboy hat in his hands. The chamber, once a symbol of Kextheri dominance, now hosted representatives from every species in the sector. "I still don't understand," a former High Council member chittered, their antennae twitching in confusion. "You could have conquered us. Instead, you taught us to dance." "Way I see it," Morrison drawled, "conquest's a mighty lonely business. Besides, y'all seemed like you needed to learn how to have a little fun." The chamber had changed. Paper cranes hung from the ceiling, a symbolic reminder of how a single ship's creativity had toppled an empire. The representatives' seats were arranged in a circle, like chairs at a campfire, rather than the old hierarchical tiers. Zextal, now serving as head of cultural integration, stepped forward. "The human vessel Constantinople didn't just change our weapons," she addressed the assembly. "They changed how we think. The paper cranes taught us art can be stronger than weapons. Their music showed us joy in movement. Their cowboy ways taught us that sophistication doesn't equal superiority." "Speaking of cowboys," Morrison interjected, "how's that first rodeo arena coming along?" "Construction is ahead of schedule." Zextal's mandibles clicked in amusement. "Though I'm still not convinced teaching Kextheri to ride mechanical bulls is wise. Trust me, Commander. Nothing builds character like being thrown across a room by a spinning piece of equipment." The chamber's doors opened, admitting Lieutenant Martinez and Lieutenant Commander Wei. "Sir," Martins reported, barely containing her excitement, "we're picking up signals from Earth." A hush fell over the assembly. After 3 months of being stranded, contact with home was finally possible. "A research fleet picked up our last transmission," Wei explained. "They'll be here within the week." Morrison nodded, then turned back to the council. "Well, folks, looks like the cavalry's finally arriving. Might want to prepare your best welcome dance. Will you leave?" The question came from a young Kextheri cadet, one of many who had adopted human-style modifications to their ceremonial armor, including a distinctly hat-like crest. Morrison shared a look with his crew, then grinned. "Now why would we do that? We got ourselves a mighty fine setup here. Figure Earth could use an embassy in these parts, and I reckon we've got just the crew for the job." The chamber erupted in clicks, chirps, and various alien expressions of approval. Plans were already being made for the Earth Fleet's welcome celebration, a combination of traditional Kextheri ceremonies and what Morrison's crew had taught them of Earth customs. Besides, Morrison continued, settling his hat back on his head, "Someone's got to teach the next generation proper rodeo technique. Can't leave that to amateurs." Later, standing on the observation deck of the now-retired Constantinople, Morrison watched ships from across the sector moving through space in new ways. Without energy weapons, they'd had to adapt, learn, grow. Some had taken to using magnetically accelerated projectiles. Others had developed creative uses for gravitational fields. All of them moved with a certain flair that hadn't existed before. "Message from the Earth Fleet," Martinez called out. "They're asking about our situation. Should I tell them about the space rodeo?" Morrison chuckled. Tell them we found something better than a way home. We found good neighbors." Above them, a new paper crane drifted past the viewport, carried on solar winds. But this one was different, folded from a mix of earth paper and Kextheri materials, a symbol of cultures not just coexisting, but creating something new together. You know, we mused, watching the crane spin slowly against the starfield. When we first got stranded here, I thought we found the worst luck in the galaxy. Son, Morrison replied, back home we've got a saying. Sometimes you don't find luck, luck finds you. He adjusted his hat, grinning at the sight of a Kuk's Theory ship attempting its first barrel roll. And sometimes, just sometimes, getting lost is the best way to end up exactly where you need to be.